the Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, also known as the PBO's favorite committee, OGGO. We're going to 5:30. We've got a hard stop at 5:30. I'm going to reserve the last, hopefully just 5 minutes to confirm the issue on the GG as well as a letter to the CBSA. I know we've got a lot of questions, so I'm hoping we can just leave it to the end and we can get going right now. We have Mr. Giroux. Welcome back. It is always a pleasure to have you with us. You have an opening statement for us, sir.
So good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to appear before you to discuss our analysis of Supplementary Estimates B for the 2022-23 fiscal year. I'm joined today by our lead analyst on the estimates, Caitlin van der Wies. These supplementary estimates outline $25.8 billion in spending, $20.8 billion of which requires approval by Parliament. Of note, proposed spending related to Budget 2022 will total $7.8 billion in these estimates, which brings the projected total for Budget 2022 expenditures in 2022-23 to around $11.7 billion. Additionally, federal spending on the resolution of Indigenous legal claims is set to increase by roughly $5.4 billion, given the government's continued focus on identifying and resolving claims. The balance pertains to other new policy measures that the government identified outside of its standard financial cycle, that is, the budget or fall economic statement. Je vais maintenant conclure en...
I'll now conclude in French. A concern that I would like to point out is that the departmental results reports for the fiscal year 2021-22 have yet to be released. This means that the government is asking parliamentarians to consider and approve all new spending in 2022-2023 without knowing what results have been achieved in the previous fiscal year. Parliamentarians may wish to request that the government publish the departmental results reports no later than 6 months after the close of the fiscal year. This would provide parliamentarians with more time for ex-post financial scrutiny and better information for assessing the government's budget plans and estimates. We would be pleased to respond to any questions you may have regarding our analysis of the Supplementary Estimates B or other Parliamentary Budget Office work. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Giroux. We'll start off with 6 minutes with Ms. Cusi, please.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you very much, sir and ma'am, for being here with us today. Mr. Giroux.
Supplementary estimates, you said that from 2015-16 to 2020-21, the number of FTEs grew by an average of 2.3% annually, roughly from 342,000 to 391,000. I also have here a quote from the Hill Times that you estimate $2.3 billion of additional spending will be needed to accommodate growth in the federal public service. That would see the size of the workforce grow to around 409,000 jobs within 5 years. $2.3 billion, that's quite a number. What is the guiding factor for the significant increases to the public service?
It's mostly recent and ongoing investments in various areas of government spending. For example, in the fall economic statement, there were additional monies allocated to processing immigrant applications, additional funding for the CRA. So it's difficult to pinpoint one area specifically that's responsible for that growth. It seems to be rather widespread in the public service as the government increases its spending in various areas.
I'm sure you are aware that external outsourcing is also growing significantly with a 75% increase from 2015. Do you think the government is overpaying for services or projects as they increase spending both on personnel and outsourcing contracts?
It's an interesting question for which I unfortunately don't have any answer because we have not looked at the issue of outsourcing and contracts in the public service. So it's sadly I cannot provide you with an answer on that question.
I mentioned that large number of 2.3 billion. To what extent are projected expenditure increases linked to inflation?
They are to a certain extent linked to inflation, but they're mostly driven by the growth in the number of full-time equivalents. So inflation plays a role, of course, but that will probably be reflected later on as wage negotiations get to their conclusion, which could be compensating public servants for inflation or for slightly less than inflation. So it's something that we'll be watching closely because it will have an impact on the overall personnel expenditures of the government.
And in your opinion, do you believe the personnel costs for the public service are in line with what is seen in the private sector in Canada?
I think the growth has been faster in the public sector, generally speaking, than in the private sector, if memory serves me well. And I'm saying that based on various Statistics Canada report over the last few years, but I'd have to look at the numbers in more details to provide you with a more detailed answer.
So previously I mentioned growth from 2015-16 to 2020-21. In your report, you predict the public service will go from 391,000 full-time employees to 409,000, as I mentioned previously with the link to the $2.3 billion. Do you think the government is allocating enough funds for these drastic increases to personnel in the public service?
I think so, because we have derived that projection based on government plans that have been outlined in various budgets, as well as updates or economic statements in the fall. That being said, should there be additional government initiatives announced in the coming months, then this number will probably have to rise, depending, of course, on the areas in which the government announces spending.
And further to that, can you provide more information on how you are able to predict the growth of the public service?
Yes, we look at various expenditures that are announced in the budget, in the fall economic statement, or
Kelly?
in most recent government documents. And using the nature of these government expenditures, we are in a position to determine how many public servants or FTEs that will translate into. For some measures, it's pretty straightforward. The government announces itself how many additional public servants will be hired. But for others, we have to use rules of thumb or formulas that are pretty well known to us.
In your report on the supplementary estimates, Section 1 is titled, Why the Government Wants Another $21 Billion. Do you think the funds requested in the supplementary estimates could have been forecasted in either the supplementary estimates A or the main estimates?
I personally think some of them could have been, but the issue was probably one of readiness for supplementary estimates. It's quite possible that some of these expenditures were known, but were not fully ready, for example, had not gone through the process of the Treasury Board, the group of ministers that oversees or scrutinizes expenditures, or they were not sufficiently developed by departments so that Treasury Board Secretariat did not deem them ready enough for inclusion in mains or in subs A.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Giroux.
Merci, Monsieur Giroux.
Thanks, Ms. Kusi.
Thank you.
Mr. Kuzmirchuk, please, for 6.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Giroux, for being here with us at OGGO once again. Just picking up the conversation about the growth in the public service, just looking at the period from 2018 roughly to 2021, and looking at the information on GC Infobase, we see, for example, an increase in full-time employees, about 3,000 for employment insurance. We see an additional 3,000 for tax services and processing at CRA, We see, for example, 500 FTEs additional for the Canada pension plan. At the same time, when you look at the total federal public service, it still represents 0. Even with the increases, it's about 0.84% of the population, and so which is the same proportion as back in 2010. Is that in your opinion, is that a helpful number to look at to say that, yes, even though in real numbers it's increased, but it's still relatively the same percentage of the Canadian population? Is that a helpful number?
I would say it's indeed a helpful number to put that into perspective, because it's one thing to look at the absolute number, but compared to the average or to the Canadian population as a whole, or compared to the labor force as a whole, it is indeed a good metric by which to look at the size of the public service.
I imagine more Canadians means more, for example, inquiries about CPP, more inquiries regarding employment insurance and whatnot. So naturally, I imagine you would need more full-time employees to handle that. Is that one way of looking at it?
It's one potential way of looking at it. By the same token, you'd expect also with more services moving online as opposed to in person, as has been the case with CRA, notably, there would be efficiency gains, especially with answers to questions by Canadians. So the number of FTEs per million population would not necessarily be the same in 2022 as it was in 2010, but there may very well be other factors at play. So yes, that's potentially one good explanation, but there are other factors to consider as well.
No, and fair enough. That's a good answer. Do we, in your opinion, comparing, for example, the federal public service in 2010 and comparing them to the federal public service today, are we asking our federal public servants to do more, would you say, as well, too? I mean, we live in a much more complicated world. There's a lot more programs out there that this government has introduced. Are we asking as well the staff to do more, would you say? Is it fair to say that?
That's a broad question, and I don't think I'm the best placed person to answer that question.
Okay, gotcha. But taking that into consideration, under the Conservative government, we saw dramatic cuts to the federal public service. I've heard the words "gutted" being used in terms of the cuts to full-time public servants. Does that have an impact on the level of service that the government's able to provide to Canadians when you see dramatic cuts, as we saw under the Conservative leadership?
Well, I wouldn't say dramatic cuts. It's true that the number of full-time equivalents went down from 2012-13 to, I think, 14-15, but it went down by a few percentage points. That doesn't necessarily have to translate into cuts to Canadians. If the government, in reducing the number of FTEs, decides to reduce its operations in some very specific areas, for example, letting some programs sunset, it doesn't necessarily mean that services to the population that we expect to get as Canadians will themselves be cut. But it's sure that if you reduce the number of FTEs, something's got to give at one point. It may not be direct services to Canadians. It might be grants and contributions to some groups or some sectors. It can be internal services that the public service provides to itself. But it's obvious that something's got to give. Gotcha.
Okay. I wanted to ask you as well, too. We've heard as well concerns from some areas regarding the strategic policy review that the government has indicated that it will be taking up, and there's some that are concerned that it might cause some job losses and whatnot. But are you able to speak, talking about the fact that we've seen growth in the public service? Are you able to sort of speak to how you understand the goal of the strategic policy review?
You've got about 45 seconds.
It's difficult for me to answer that because there hasn't been that many details regarding the strategic policy review. That was mentioned in budget. It was barely mentioned, if at all, I think, in the fall economic statement. And we're told to wait for more details to be announced in the coming months. probably in budget 2023. So it's hard for me to say more than that because
Yeah.
I don't have any more information.
No, fair enough, Mr. Giroux, absolutely. How much time do I have, Mr. Chair?
16 seconds.
I will yield all 16 seconds.
Thanks, Mr. Kuzmierczak. Ms. Vinola, please, for 6.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Mr. Giroux, thank you very much for being with us today. In your report, you mention the fact that unused votes have doubled compared to previous fiscal years, and you also underscore the fact that we haven't got the departmental results reports undermines to an extent the analytical work that needs to be done. So here's my question, and I think it's going to be a straightforward one for you, perhaps a tad more complicated for me, that is. What is the impact on our work as parliamentarians, i.e. that we don't have these departmental results reports, and knowing that the unused votes have doubled? Is this due to a lack of transparency on the part of departments? That is, that they haven't submitted these departmental results reports? Is this commonplace? Should we legislate to impose a deadline for the submission of reports going forward? Response. Well, your question is quite valid. It is unusual, in my opinion, to have departmental results reports that are so late in coming. To my knowledge, they still haven't been submitted when the fiscal year ended on the 31st of March. Now, on the 1st of April, departments should already have a good draft full of figures, but of course the year isn't over at that point. But we would normally expect those reports to be released a couple of months after the end of the fiscal year, leaving enough time for translation to do its job, of course. Now, the fact that you haven't received them, that nobody has received them, that deprives you of valuable information that might potentially be important. If, for example, a department calls for more and more money year after year and yet misses its own performance and results targets, well, you are entitled to question those officials and those departments as to why they're asking for more money and failing in their task in a repeated fashion. So that deprives you, as I said, of essential information. We're talking about the department's performance here after all, and yet the government is asking you to approve funding to those entities. So there's a flagrant asymmetry in terms of information. The government has the information, of course. You as parliamentarians don't have it at your disposal, and yet you're the individuals who are called upon to approve the funding. So there's a major imbalance here when it comes to information. Now, in closing, legislating a deadline for the submission of departmental results reports would be an excellent idea to avoid this kind of elastic band approach that seems to be used increasingly in terms of delays of submission. Nothing works better than a hard and fast deadline to get people back down to work. Question. One of the OGGO committee's responsibilities is to approve the budgetary votes. Either we approve them or we call for reductions. Now, in light of the fact that we haven't received the departmental results reports in time, is that perhaps a tactic, a strategy, so that we don't have an opportunity to, in fact, reduce these budgetary votes? Or perhaps it would incline us to say, well, use the money that has been unspent thus far. It seems like this might be a strategy, more or less perhaps a conscious or unconscious one, to cause the committee to skew its responsibilities. Well, that is a hypothesis, and that will be determined over time. These departmental results reports are due to parliamentarians. They are approved by ministers who are responsible for government operations. So it should therefore be quite straightforward to approve those documents. Now, is this a matter of deliberately, knowingly frustrating you in terms of getting your hands on information, forcing you, backing you into a corner to ask unpleasant questions? Is this nonchalance or laziness? It's possible. Is it perhaps a combination of the three reasons I just gave? That's also likely. But these are questions, misgivings that are completely legitimate and well-founded, I understand. The departmental results reports are nothing new, to my understanding. It's been decades that they've been an obligation. It's a normal accounting report as part of a very normal, regular process. Is it normal that a government and that public servants and officials, a government that has been in power for the past 7 years, is still not capable, well, at least this year, of submitting departmental results reports in a reasonable time frame?
Second answer, please.
C'est absolument.
Well, it isn't normal at all, Ms. Vignola. The government is capable of producing these reports. And even in the first year of government, it's quite simple. And let me tell you something here. There will be departmental results reports for next year, so parliamentarians can get a head start if they wish already.
Mr. Johns for 6 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you. Well, first, thank you for your important work, Mr. Giroux and Ms. Van der Rees. I really appreciate you being here. One of the votes referred to this committee relates to the Department of Public Works and Government Services, which is seeking just under $136 million for supplies for the healthcare system. Can you speak about the economic benefits that can be generated by this spending if the focus is placed on procuring supplies from domestic manufacturers?
Well, it can certainly generate and support a domestic industry, which, as we saw in March and April 2020, can be desperately needed at some critical periods in Canadian history. So there are clear benefits to the economy, but also to the security of the country in having these supplies produced domestically. And from that perspective, that's one aspect in which I could answer your question.
Oh, it's an important answer. And, we had a supplier in my riding, Wayward Distillery, that, pivoted and supplied PPE to first responders, healthcare workers, and then the government had a flood of foreign, hand sanitizer come in, and they had stepped in, and they ended up losing $400,000 at the end of the day because they got wiped out there. But they were trying to help, and it was pretty sad. Now, the PBO had a monitoring framework for monitoring COVID-19 spending, which seems to have been last updated in June 2021. And from the beginning of the pandemic until now, how much has been spent on procuring personal protective equipment. Do you have any sense on what portion of that spending benefited Canadian companies?
No, I don't have that information.
Okay. Well, thanks. I think it's important for us to try to figure that out, just in terms of economic leakages. And again, you talked about safety and security and the importance of that. And I hope that our committee will take time to study it, and I'll be bringing forward a motion next week to in that regard. I'll give some time to my colleagues to look at that. Earlier this fall, I tabled a motion that was adopted by this committee that it's okay. Maybe I'll start again. Earlier this fall, I tabled a motion that was adopted by this committee that recommended the Auditor General conduct a performance audit to assess whether the Treasury Board provides adequate guidance to departments on developing credible cost estimates in make or buy decisions. And in situations like the ArriveCan app, we've seen that the cost of that project can balloon over time and has ballooned over time. Can you maybe share your thoughts on whether you believe departments are currently able to generate credible cost estimates?
I would say it depends. It varies widely, and Depends on the specific sector, depends on the project. ArriveCan is an example where I haven't looked at that, so I can't comment specifically on that case. But as you may be aware, I've done cost estimates in a variety of sectors, including in national defense procurement, which I think I talked at this committee about, and the cost estimates vary differently, very widely compared between our institution and some government departments. So I'd say the capacity of government departments to provide accurate cost estimates is uneven, to be polite, and varies widely, to be more talking in more plain language.
So where do you think the difficulties arise in developing credible estimates, and do you think there's a link with the increase in LOP spending that we're seeing as well?
It's difficult to determine why some government departments seem to have such a hard time coming up with reasonable cost estimates, because most of the time they're experts in their own area and they should have access to data more easily than we do in our office. So they have the expertise, they have the means to get access to data that sometimes we don't. So maybe it's a question of interest or a question of willingness to develop these cost estimates, or maybe these public servants who are asked to do these cost estimates don't have the desire to have substantial or credible cost estimates. So to be honest, it bedazzles me.
Well, is it possible that departments are seeking, or are they basically seeking more than they need because they're struggling to accurately estimate costs?
There's a structural element to that. So by legislation, a department cannot spend more than its authorities. So if you are a chief financial officer or a deputy minister or an assistant deputy minister, one of the last things you want is to blow your vote, as public servants call it. So spend more than you are budgeted for. So there's a natural bias towards asking for slightly more to ensure that you will be able to deliver on your mandate without spending more than what you're authorized to spend. So the system
I'm afraid I have to cut you off there, Mr. Giroux.
No problem.
Mr. Chambers, welcome to OGGO, and 5 minutes to you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Wonderful to see you again, sir. Welcome, ma'am. My colleague, Ms. Kusi, we talked about FTEs. Obviously, it's a large and growing expense of the federal government. That's a resource that the government uses to deploy its services to Canadians. One of the items that I don't hear a lot talked about is productivity metrics. So we spend a lot of time talking about how to encourage the private sector to become more productive, but when we're constantly asked for additional resources and spending to increase the size of the public sector, often we're not also asking, okay, how are we holding ourselves accountable to ensure that, from a productivity perspective, whether we're using, new digital tools to help manage some of those costs, but also, are we delivering the services in the time frames and service standards that we've set out for ourselves? And GC Infobase does not seem to provide a lot of comfort, at least in the recent time, that we are meeting a lot of those service standards across many departments. And we don't have to get into each of those issues here, but how would you recommend parliamentarians think about metrics and productivity with respect to a growing public service?
That's a broad-ranging question. We looked at whether one department in particular, the Canada Revenue Agency, they strive to be a world-class tax agency, or strived. Maybe they changed internally. And we found that they're average, roughly speaking. But there doesn't seem to be any productivity metrics or measurement that I'm aware of that I encountered. And that seems to be in good part due to a taboo within the public service, that if you try to measure productivity of public servants, it's seen as imposing a quota. Like you have to go after that many taxpayers in a given day or week. Whereas I think from a manager's perspective, it makes sense to have a sense as to who are your good performers and who you need to work with. But that seems to be absent in the public service. Maybe it exists in some areas, but it doesn't seem to be closely tracked. Another issue that we looked at is the Indigenous Services Canada and Crown Indigenous Relations performance metrics, their own metrics, and they change them all the time, frequently, and they don't meet them about half of the time. So the public service seems to have a big problem or a taboo about measuring its own progress or success, because there are successes, but it seems to be sorely lacking.
Thank you. And, I think Canadians would have they would be okay with some of these issues if the service standards were being met kind of within the service standard that the governments have publicly said that they would hold themselves accountable to. But since we've seen operational challenges across many departments, I think this is now forcing parliamentarians to start asking, what are these productivity metrics that we ought to be asking the public service to hold themselves to, in addition to the Treasury Board now publicly declaring that the new kind of hybrid working environment is here to stay. And, that's a discussion they're having, obviously, with their employees. But, if this is the new way of working, I'm hearing from you that it would be a good idea to start focusing on the output of some of these departments to ensure that we're within service standard. Is that fair? Like we should be asking more questions about productivity. Should we be studying that? Is that something that your office would look at, or is that something we should ask another officer?
That's certainly something you would be fully entitled to ask, and I would hope that you'd be able to relatively easily get answers to these questions, because that's something that, as managers in the public service, they should be tracking fairly regularly. Whether it would be my office or the Auditor General, it would depend on the exact points that you have in mind. But I would probably think that the Auditor General or her office would be in a better position, and she may not like me for saying that, but I think it's something that would probably fall better within the bailiwick of the AG.
You just got off her Christmas card list, perhaps. But thank you, sir.
That's 5 minutes on the dot. Mr. Zouari for 5, please.
Mr. Chair, and once again, welcome to Mr. Giroux and Madame Van der Wies to our committee. Mr. Giroux, you talked about, you expressed some concern about the increase in lapse spending. Can you unpack about this lapse spending and specifically by area, and your thoughts around why, what do you think is the driver for these lapse spendings?
Thank you for your question. So we see increases in lapses in public health due to COVID spending. We also see increases in lapse funds for the Department of, or in the Indigenous portfolio due to the government's increased desire for reconciliation. These are usually related to claims and settlements. In the other areas, such as transport and infrastructure, this could be due to supply chain issues as a result of the pandemic and strong weather events in the north, as mentioned in a previous meeting here in OGGO by TBS. Outside of that, it's hard to say without departmental results reports, and I'll let Mr. Giroux continue.
And the implications of these lapses can lead to, for example, departments not being able to fully deliver on the mandate that ministers and the Prime Minister have given them. For example, if they are not able to fully spend in some specific areas, it may be fewer, it may mean fewer, for example, land claims that get settled, or it can have impacts on the delivery of healthcare services to some communities. These are all hypothetical, of course, but lapses may also mean that departments ask for more than what they really needed. So it does not necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. Personally, as a taxpayer, I'd rather have government departments not spend just for the sake of spending if they don't need all the funds that have been allocated to them. However, it may indicate a mismatch between what government departments planned on spending and what was realistically achievable.
Thank you. It was interesting that the notion of challenges within the supply chain and specifically labor shortages was highlighted in your response. Can you spend a little bit of time unpacking that for us and the impact on the lapse?
Thank you. So that was a response from TBS, which I could go back and ask them further and get back to you in writing if you would like.
Yeah, we would appreciate it if you could do that.
Sure.
Next question. The PBO recently reported that the CBI inflation is solidly on track to return to its 2% target. Can you elaborate on that? We are at 6 I believe 6.8, 6.9, and everybody's anxiously, awaiting the next round of results as the inflation. So when I read that and I said, "Oh my God," welcome you here and ask that question. So can you shed some light into how are we tracking on to 2%?
That's an interesting question. I've been asked that a few times in the last several weeks. So we believe that the Bank of Canada will continue probably to increase its rate a little bit more, and that together with a marked slowdown that we have already seen happening in the world economy will be contributing to reducing inflationary pressures, together with the supply chain disruptions that are being fixed across the world, and energy prices hopefully stabilizing. So that's all the reasons why we think that inflation will slowly, gradually return to within the 1 to 3% target range that the Bank of Canada has in mind.
Yeah, you said gradually. Do you have any idea around the length of time that it's going to take?
I'm
if memory
afraid
serves-
we're not going to have the length of time necessary to answer that. Perhaps she could submit it in writing because that's our 5 minutes. Well,
Okay.
I'll allow
No
Mr.
worries,
Giroux
no worries.
three more seconds the next time around. We have Ms. Vinola, and I'm going to combine this 2.5 with her, and you'll lose your second 2.5. Same with Mr. John, so you get one more 5 minute, and that'll be it. So 5 minutes, please, Mrs. Vinola.
Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Most appreciated. Currently, Mr. Giroux, the report on lapsed spending is about 5%. Is that a reasonable amount of lapsed spending, 5%? To what extent should it be curtailed? And is it useful in this kind of report when we see that there is lapsed spending, that some money has gone unspent? Is it useful to know that information? Response. Well, the report of 5% on operating expenditures and 20% for capital expenditures are appropriate to mention in such a report for several reasons. One, because in a way it rewards departments who manage funds well and don't spend all of their funds. So some funds can be carried over to the next year, and it also avoids the kind of crazy behaviour we see in March, where departments, to not lose funding, spend just so that they don't have lapsed spending. Now, that there are real cases of this. It's not just an urban myth. Now, sometimes there's cases of 10% in lapsed spending. If there's no cap on monies that lapse, well, the argument against that is that it creates instability and difficulty predicting government spending if a department carries over hundreds of millions of dollars from one year to another. That makes the estimates much, much more difficult to put in place. Question. I'll come back to the departmental results reports, if I may. Normally, in April, the departments should have completed them or be on the verge of doing so, and then they just have to get them translated. Now, if 4 to 6 months after the fiscal year ends, departments had to submit their departmental results reports and that it was mandatory, would that have an impact on the budgetary cycle, the supply cycle, and so on and so forth? Would it mean that we would have the same cycle but a more effective and efficient one because our analyses would be more exhaustive and comprehensive? Response, well, I think that we can maintain the cycle as it is, but it would be more effective and efficient from your standpoint because those documents are useful. I imagine that the departments that do submit them on time, well, to the extent that the information is useful, sometimes if there's one report from public accounts, for example, that's late, that's not going to affect the budget cycle too much. Now, a more general question to do with lapsed spending. Have you noticed any new trends that have developed over recent years that we should be aware of as parliamentarians? And if so, to what extent are those trends due to the pandemic of COVID-19? Well, the trend that we're seeing is that when the government increases its spending, as we've seen since 2015 to 2019, the bureaucratic machine often has trouble keeping up. So when the government is growing, it is difficult for the bureaucracy to spend at the same rate. So it's generally in those periods that we see an increase in lapsed spending. And the contrary is true. When times are tougher and government spending goes down, well, there is less lapsed spending, generally speaking. So it seems to have to do with the size of the state, basically.
Je vais parler un peu.
I referred to the brief that Amanda Clark from the University of Carleton submitted to the committee that stated that the spending on consultancy services for IT increased by 54% over the past 5 years. That's about 10.8% per year. And the subcontractors don't enjoy the same working conditions as public servants.
Perhaps Mr. Giroux can get back to us? No? Okay. Thanks, Mr. Johns, for 5 minutes.
In your report on the, in your report on the fall economic statement, you noted the federal public accounts are published later than most provincial public accounts, and the government continually, falls short of the standard for advanced practice in the International Monetary Fund's financial reporting guidelines. Those guidelines recommend governments publish their annual financial statements within 6 months of the fiscal year end. Do you have a sense of why the federal government continues to have issues with timely financial reporting, and can you maybe explain why 6 months is considered a a best practice?
So there's probably two ways to answer it, the question, sorry. So the first way to answer your question as to why, I'd say because they can, just because. The more honest answer would probably be because there's no hard deadline for government departments or Treasury Board Secretariat or the government to be timely in its tabling of the public accounts. So there's no deadline other than by December 31st. So time expands or work expands to fill the time available. And they do that relatively well, and they've done that over the last several months. So by saying that, I think I'm off the Christmas card of many more people, but that's okay. And 6 months is a good practice because that's seen as way sufficient to provide accurate public accounts, but also be meaningfully within a period of time where if there's a need to course correct, it is still possible. But when you have public accounts that are tabled in November or December, the fiscal year is already 2/3 in the way. So if you, as parliamentarians, see that there's a major issue, which has not been the case in Canada, but should that ever be the case, if you see there's a major issue with an area of spending, by then it's very likely too late to make any correction to that wrong trajectory.
You cite any jurisdictions where they're doing it, much better?
I want to say Australia, but I'd have to go back to you on specific examples that are appropriate and have the relatively same system of government or comparable.
Okay, thank you. In the PBO report regarding the 2021 Supplementary Estimates B, it was noted that the PBO is collecting performance data from numerous federal departments and agencies. Is the PBO continuing to collect performance data? And if so, can you please maybe provide details on the type of information being collected and from where?
Okay. So we regularly look at performance indicators of various departments, especially in areas that we know are of interest to parliamentarians. So we do that on an ongoing basis when that information is available. For more details, I'll probably have to get back to you.
Do you believe or think that the federal spending can, be leveraged to better support the domestic PPE industry and generate both economic and national security benefits? Can you maybe speak a little bit on that?
Clearly, I think as one of the main purchasers of goods in the country, goods and services, it's clear that if the government wants to leverage its spending power and its contractual capacity, it can indeed it can contribute to the support and even the development of significant industries if it wishes to do so. It's clearly stated its intention to do that with the naval strategy, and it could certainly do the same thing with PPE.
This month, you published a report analyzing the fall economic statement, and in it you compared economic risk scenarios put forward by the PBO and Finance Canada. The PBO scenario depicts possible implications of over-tightening of monetary policy, whereas Finance Canada's scenario depicts the consequences of persistent inflationary pressures that require tighter monetary policy. Which scenario do you believe is more likely, and are we past the point where soft landing is possible?
I'm afraid I have to interrupt. I think I'll be off your Christmas card list. Would you be able to provide that in writing to the committee, please? We now have Ms. Block, please, for 5 minutes, and happy birthday, Ms. Block.
Oh. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us here today. I was certainly looking forward to having you here and being able to ask some questions around the supplementary estimates B in the report that you put forward. But first I want to go to something that you mentioned in your opening statement. And I want to quote it to you said the balance pertains to other new policy measures that the government identified outside of its standard financial cycle. And you identified the fall economic statement as being outside the standard financial cycle. And I would just like to ask you, what is the impact of introducing something new into the standard financial cycle on the information that we receive and all of the processes within our budgetary cycle?
Well, it's something that all governments, to my recollection, have done, so it's nothing new. What was surprising in the fall economic statement was the number of spending items that were contained in one of the annexes. And this annex listed all these spending items that had been taken or decisions made after the budget and before the fall economic statement. And the list was quite long. And for me, who follows government spending rather closely, I saw items there that I had never heard about. So there were items that were decisions that were made on spending outside of the budget and fall statement normal cycle. And it's not an issue in and of itself. Governments need to have that flexibility to make government announcement or funding decisions as they see fit. But the number of these measures suggests that the budget was not a firm, solid government spending plan if a couple of weeks or very few months after, there were already a number of additional spending decisions that had to be made. So it begs the question as to what's the purpose of a budget if a couple of weeks after there's already new items appearing on the radar screen for new government expenditures.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you pointing that out and providing that explanation. On page 6 of your report, you highlight lapsed funding, and we've had a fair bit of discussion around lapsed funding, but you highlighted that lapsed funding has doubled. And we don't know what that lapsed funding is, why that funding has lapsed, because the departmental results reports, the government has failed to release those documents, and we actually don't have a commitment from the president of the Treasury Board as to when they will be tabled or made public. So I'm just wanting to ask you, what is you've potentially described what the impact is on our ability to do the work that we need to do as parliamentarians, but in particular for this committee, where we are mandated to scrutinize public spending. Is the work of parliamentarians actually being impeded by the fact that these reports are not being tabled in a timely manner?
Well, I think you're collectively in a better position to determine that than me. But I would think your work is negatively impacted if you don't know what the performance of government departments has been for a year that ended in March 2022, and we're here December 1st, and we still don't know how government departments did. But yet, you're on the point of approving almost the final numbers or the final spending items. So next time you'll have a serious opportunity to scrutinize spending. If you see that something went amiss in 2021-22, will be for the 23-24 spending cycle. So there'll be a full year where government departments that failed, if there's such a case, they'll have a free pass. And I think that's detrimental to proper government accountability and scrutiny.
Thank you very much. How much?
10 seconds.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Block. Mr. Baines for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. My first question is, the PBO's June inflation monitor found that, quote, supply or sector-specific issues are a key driver of high inflation, unquote. Can you please elaborate on that?
We released a report a couple of months ago, I think it's in June, where we looked at the main sources of inflation, and we found that a good part of inflation was due to supply chain disruptions. So domestic demand is, of course, one important factor, but it's not the only factor, and that's what that sentence that you quoted refers to. So foreign or even domestic, but mostly worldwide supply chain disruptions that are constraining supply and therefore contributing to price pressure, upward price pressures.
There was another statement in there that said, quote, rising energy and food prices are a global phenomenon, unquote. Can you please elaborate on that as well?
So we also noticed, which is what is widely acknowledged, that energy prices have been under pressure worldwide, in good part as a result of the invasion of Ukraine by Russia, but also due to strong demand in many countries for energy. So energy prices have increased significantly at the time that we released that report. And food prices also shot up when there were significant concerns about supply related to the war in Ukraine again, but also some more localized issues related to food production. So that's what we meant by that sentence. It's not a Canadian phenomenon, not a purely domestic phenomenon, but it's something that's affecting countries around the world.
Thank you for clarifying. Part of the greening movement goals for PSPC include the work that is being done to help green buildings and reduce GHG emissions by using sustainable resources. Do you believe that funding for these green solutions is a sound investment for the future?
That's a good question, but I think that's a policy decision much more than something that's within my own bailiwick as to determine. I don't think I'm the best place to determine whether investments in greening government buildings is appropriate or inappropriate. I think that's up to you to determine that as decision makers.
Well, I'll move on to, you mentioned you've appeared before to talk about the shipbuilding strategy. So can you please share with us your thoughts on the national shipbuilding strategy and how you believe resource allocation could be improved?
Building strategy, we looked at specific procurement projects, notably the Canadian surface combatants, and we found that the cost of procuring these 15 warships is expected to be significantly higher than it was initially anticipated. So our last estimate for the development and procurement phase estimates the cost to be about $81 billion, if I'm not mistaken, whereas initial estimates were about $26 billion, initial estimates by the government. So there's a big discrepancy there that's in good part due to the time that has passed since the initial government estimate, but also design changes and many other decisions related to the design of the ships. So I could elaborate a little bit more on that, but I think your question was broader and related to the national shipbuilding strategy, which I cannot comment on in its entirety because we haven't looked at the strategy in its totality.
Thank you. And how has the Parliamentary Budget Office incorporated gender-based analysis plus GBA plus into this report?
Just a brief answer, please.
It's a Government of Canada policy. It's not something that we are necessarily considering in each and every one of our reports.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Giroux. Thank you, Mr. Baines. Ms. Cusi for 5, please.
Thank you, Chair. I had ended my last round of questioning on the supplementary estimate section 1 titled Why the Government Wants Another $21 billion. And my previous question was, do you think the funds requested in the supplementary estimates could have been forecasted in either the supplementary estimates A or the main estimates? My follow-up question to that is, do you think the funds requested are going towards new programs or towards operational costs that should have been predicted at a much earlier time?
It varies depending on the specific items. For example, there's significant money that's allocated to Indigenous issues, notably claims settlement. So I think on this one, it's much more difficult to predict the exact timing where funds will need to be dispersed, because it depends on not only on the government settling these claims, but also on the aggrieved parties accepting the proposed settlement. So on this part, it would probably have been very difficult for the government to anticipate that before. The same probably goes for additional support for Ukraine. So difficult to determine exactly when the funds will be necessary. For other things, such as the finance request for $2 billion to reduce backlog of surgeries and procedures, I think this one could probably have been anticipated a bit sooner. But again, others can debate that. Leveraging transit funding to build more homes by finance, this was a budget measure. It could probably have made its way into subs A, but officials will probably say it would not have been possible. So I think we need to scrutinize each and every one of these big ticket items to determine more precisely whether they would have been ready on time for mains or more likely supplementary estimates A.
That's very analytical. That's great. Thank you so much. I'm going to switch to another topic now. We are seeing the continuation of virtual work within the public service and sort of the working model being redesigned in terms of both sort of more out of the NCR type of rotational workplaces, in addition to simply more working from home, virtual working, or virtual work, I should say. I shouldn't specify that it would be at home. But virtual work. Has your office done any estimates in terms of the percentile of federal servants that have migrated to virtual, and sort of the impact of that on existing vacancy rates, both sort of rented and owned properties within the National Capital Region? Have you taken a look at any of that?
No, we have not looked at that. Not yet.
Do you anticipate that you will look at that in the future, given that when the Minister of Procurement was here, she indicated that departments were beginning to evaluate their current work models, or I guess emerging work models, and the number of employees that will be working virtually? Do you anticipate ever that you would get an idea as to what this might potentially have to estimate what this would look like in the future in terms of cost savings? Well, actually, I guess that would be a good question. Would you know offhand the current rent for all buildings within the National Capital Region?
So to answer your last question,
sure.
No. And whether we have any study of vacancy rates and the impact of migrating to hybrid work arrangements, that's not currently on our work plan. But should the committee wish us to do so, we'd be happy to oblige.
Okay, well, that's very encouraging. That sounds almost like a request for us to put a motion forward to evaluate this. Thank you so much. I have some more questions on the public accounts, and I think how we can make them easier to read for Canadians and to be understood by Canadians, but I guess I will save that for a further meeting, Monsieur Giroux. Thank you for being here today, and again, thank you for your work as well.
Thank you, Ms. Kusi. Back to Mr. Jouari for 5 minutes, please.
Mr. Giroux, I'm going to go back to the question that got unanswered. So you had indicated that you believe over time we are heading in the right direction between 1 to 3% of inflation. And I was asking you if you could take a guesstimate around the timing, how long that would take. What would your estimate be as far as the timing?
Well, in the current situation with the economic picture that we have right now, we anticipate inflation to gradually decrease over the course of next year, and by the middle to the end of 2024, we could be we estimate we'll be in the 1 to 3% range, probably at the upper end of that range, but sometime by the end of 2024, assuming that there's no other unforeseen events that hit us as the war in Ukraine has.
Thank you for that. Over the last while, when during the question period and often in media, we hear our colleagues across the aisle talk about this being a homemade and our government policy driven inflation. Can you shed some light on that? And what are your thoughts on it? Do you think it's all about the policies that we roll out during the COVID-19?
I think government spending and government supports have, without question, contributed to inflation. The governor of the bank has hinted at that, and it's clear that when you inject money massively in an economy, it is bound to support prices. It supports demand, and that was the intention. Supporting. Absolutely not. There are supply chain issues, and we've seen that. People have talked extensively about the various supply chain issues with shops or factories shutting down in China, for example, or the sending of goods, shipping of goods across the globe being interrupted by various events. Energy is the price of many energy commodities are traded globally, so the price of a barrel of oil, whether we produce it domestically or we buy it from abroad, is influenced by external events. So these are two very easy examples to understand that inflation has domestic but also external components. Food is also affected by energy prices, but also by shortages or lack of supply and increased demand in many parts of the world. So there's a lot of factors that come into play when determining inflation, overall inflation, some of which are domestic, some of which are global.
Thank you. In Richmond Hill, I have 5 community councils. One of the community councils is on affordability. A lot of my constituents were quite happy when we announced the $500 one top-up on the rent and the $640 that for dental care for those low-income families that went into effect today. Can you, in your opinion, these are the expenditure that our government has put on the table during the time that we also say we need to make sure that we keep our powder dry, as you use, or we say we need to be fiscally prudent. And there's some of their concern was around whether it will impact and to what extent it will impact the inflation. If you could shed some light on that, we'd appreciate it.
So that's a question that was asked to our office a few times, especially related to the affordability measures announced by the government in September, dental care, housing, and the doubling of the GST credit. So we call that dental, rental, and GST. And the total costs in 1 year is about, I think, $4.5 billion. We looked at the inflationary impact of that, and it's a decimal or to the second decimal. So it's a very marginal impact, upward impact on inflation, because it's a relatively small amount in the grand scheme of the national economy, and it's temporary.
And our national economy is in what range?
$2,700 billion, so
2.7 trillion.
2.6, 2.7.
Yeah, 2.6.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jawari. And Mr. Chambers, over to you, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The fall economic statement, in a summary that your office put out, the government has claimed that it exceeded its savings target for last year by about $800 million because there was unspent COVID supports. How do you characterize that spending's target achievement? Would you consider that a spending target achieved?
No is the short answer. When that review was announced in budget 2022, it was supposed to be in this year or next. So, and the budget was tabled in April. But the government in the fall statement claims victory for something that happened before the budget. So to me, that sounds like claiming that what you did in the past before the budget is sufficient to deliver on something you said you would do in the future. So the time zones don't intersect at all when it comes to that specific review.
Thank you. I'd also make the point that that's not run rate savings that's being achieved. That's a one-time spending that was not spent. So if the government has an objective to save money over the long term, they have to find that money again every year in other programs. Next year, we're projected to spend about $43 billion in interest payments on the debt. I think the Canada Health transfer for next year is about $45 billion. And it is far exceeding, say, what we spend on national defense, as an example, some other large government programs. Is there a level at which debt interest servicing costs as a percentage of expenditures that you think we should be paying attention to? I think the previous governor of the Bank of Canada, David Dodge, says he has in his mind about 10 cents of every dollar. I think we're close to 9, maybe pushing the 10 now. What's your thoughts on that?
That's a difficult question to answer because I think it boils down to policy preferences because keeping the debt servicing costs, as we call them, lower as a proportion of tax revenues implies decisions that need to be made on areas of spending. So all that to say, there's no magical number or line in the sand where things get out of hand or become catastrophically expensive. So there's no clear point where things are deemed to be unviable or too expensive. But it's true that if you compare the debt servicing costs with other government expenditures, it can seem to be very expensive and leading to difficult trade-offs. If, for example, you have to spend more on debt servicing costs than you spend on transfers to person and to provinces if we were to get there. So
thank you. At the Finance Committee earlier this week, you had an exchange with a colleague about the fundamental policy change on the workers' benefit. And I'm not sure we explored that fully because we ended the exchange with you suggesting that there could be circumstances in which someone could be making a significant amount of money in a future year but still have a government benefit. And you expressed some concerns about that. Could you just outline for us here what that policy change could mean and the results that it could lead to?
Sure. So quickly, the policy change you're referring to is the decision to provide the Canada Workers Benefit in anticipation to lower middle income workers, but to also not recoup these advance payments should these workers earn more than the maximum threshold. And that last part was not announced in the fall economic statement. So I took issue with the fact that that part was not transparently announced in the fall statement, but also with the fact that this change will mean that there could well end up a situation where somebody who earns $20,000 in a year next year gets advance payments for the Canada Workers Benefit, which I think is not a bad thing at all. But in that year where he or she gets the advance payments, is making $100,000 because they've improved their own situation. And the government decides not to recoup these advance payments. So my question is whether this is the best use of these funds to allocate money to those who earn more than the maximum earn more than the maximum under the Canada Workers Benefit.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Mr. Baines for 5 minutes. Then we'll finish up with Ms. Block. And then I need about 1 minute for some committee work. Mr. Baines?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you comment on how the estimates support Canada's immigration strategy?
I can talk about the amount that's in the estimate on for the immigration strategy. So there's, if my recollection is accurate, there's about $1.2 billion in voted authorities for Immigration, Refugees, and Citizenship Canada to help the government deliver on its new immigration plan, which seeks to increase the number of immigrants in the country to, I don't have the numbers in front of me, to above 400,000 per year, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure. And then your own analysis of supplementary estimates, you had billions of are for the resolution of Indigenous legal claims. Are those discretionary?
Are discretionary to a certain extent, in the sense that the government could decide to not settle these claims for a number of years, but at one point it will likely become unavoidable to settle these claims, either by negotiations or, more likely, if the government were to not want to address these issues, through the courts. So there's some element of discretion when it comes to the timing of these claims, but not that much discretion for the settlement of the claims themselves. So it's a timing. The discretion is with timing.
Thank you. Similar type of question. You have $4.8 billion for fighting the pandemic, and is that discretionary?
I think this aspect is more discretionary. For example, there's funding of $1.8 billion to buy more COVID-19 rapid tests. So the government could have decided to buy less or buy none at all and leave that to other jurisdictions. There's also funding to foreign affairs or global affairs to support public health measures in developing countries, which is, I think, discretionary. And similarly, there's funding for the Public Health Agency of Canada to provide $700 million to fund medical research and vaccine development, which is discretionary. Whether that would be a good decision to abandon that or not, I leave others to determine that. And there's other funding decisions that are discretionary, and they're under the COVID-19 funding rubric.
And just a final one on $2.5 billion to help Ukraine, a Western democracy fighting for its very existence. Are those funds discretionary?
I think they are, by definition, discretionary, because my understanding is that there's no legal obligation for the government of Canada to provide these fundings. But again, discretionary does not mean that it's inappropriate. It's just that there's no legal obligation for the government to provide these fundings.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Baines. We'll go over to Ms. Block, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And my question is perhaps a short one. In March of 2020, this government tried to pass legislation that would have given them the authority to spend money for almost 2 years with no scrutiny and no ability to hold them to account. And so as we talk about the situation we're in right now, without a hard deadline for the release of departmental results, reports, but yet a very tight timeline for parliamentarians to approve additional spending, they may in part be accomplishing that goal of spending money with very little scrutiny and an inability to hold them to account. We've talked about the fact that there is no hard deadline for the release of these reports. What could we or should we as parliamentarians be doing to rectify this situation, to change the current circumstances that we find ourselves in? How do we get a hard deadline put into the process, into our budgeting process?
I think with respect to having timely departmental results report, one obvious solution that comes to mind is legislating a deadline of, for example, September 30th or 6 months after the end of the fiscal year, no later than, and inserting that into the Financial Administration Act. That would be, I think, the best solution to ensure that you, as parliamentarians, get the departmental results report in a more timely manner. So legislative amendments would be the way to go.
Thank you very much.
Well, thanks very much, Ms. Block. Mr. Giroux, Ms. Van der Wees, thanks for joining us today. Before you go, though, I just have a couple questions, if you don't mind. As chair, I'd like to exercise my prerogative. I'm wondering if the PBO, I realize you can't answer it now, but if you could get back to the committee, I'm curious about the impact of the higher energy prices and energy exports on the federal revenue or federal revenues. We received a note back from Finance saying that it wasn't necessarily a positive impact on revenues, which I find very odd. I wonder if you could get back to us. And then, if you don't mind, I'm wondering if you know now, the dental program, if you have costing of the administrative costs, both at the lump sum, but also as a percentage of the overall cost, if you have that available now?
I have to get back to you on that, not to give you inaccurate numbers.
Excessive. So I'm quite curious how much we're actually spending on administration rather than actual delivering to folks. Yeah. Yes. So thank you very much, the two of you, for joining us. Committee, I just have a couple very quick items before we see if we can adjourn. We've sent around the information regarding the GG, the years that we're going to choose, that was chosen by the analysts. So I just have to ask if the committee approves these time periods as perfect. And the second one is a letter that was been prepared regarding CBSA, if we can get approval for that. Wonderful. Thank you very much. Mr. Baker, thanks for joining us today. I'm sorry you weren't able to join in. Mr. Collins, thanks for joining us. Mr. Chambers, thanks for joining us today. And from the PBO, again, always an absolute pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And we are adjourned.